You're not authorized to enter. Moments before she took control, Sarah Martinez stood at the reinforced steel doors of the Federal Emergency Management Center, her identification badge trembling slightly in her grip. The red light above the scanner blinked mockingly as she swiped her card for the third time. Each beep echoed through the sterile hallway like a countdown to failure. "Access denied," the electronic voice announced with mechanical indifference. Behind her, she could hear the hurried footsteps of senior officials rushing past, their voices tight with urgency. The crisis had been escalating for 6 hours now, and every minute of delay meant more lives at risk. Sarah had spent the last 2 years preparing for exactly this moment, studying every protocol, memorizing every emergency procedure, earning certifications that hung proudly on her office wall. Yet here she stood, locked out of the very room where her expertise was desperately needed. The morning had started like any other Tuesday at the Regional Emergency Coordination Office in Denver. Sarah arrived at 7 sharp, as always, her coffee still steaming as she settled into her cubicle on the 3rd floor. At 28, she was the youngest emergency response coordinator in the department's history, a fact that her colleagues never let her forget. Her supervisor, Director Harrison, had made it clear from day one that she would need to prove herself twice as hard as anyone else. "Martinez, you handle the routine stuff," he would say during briefings. "Leave the real emergencies to the experienced team." But Sarah knew emergencies didn't follow schedules or respect seniority. She had studied meteorology at Colorado State, graduating summa cum laude before earning her master's in emergency management. Her thesis on rapid response coordination during natural disasters had been published in 3 academic journals. She spoke fluent Spanish, essential for communicating with nearly 30% of the region's population during evacuations. Most importantly, she had an intuitive understanding of how disasters unfolded, a gift for seeing patterns that others missed. That Tuesday morning, as she reviewed overnight weather reports, something caught her attention. A low-pressure system moving in from the west showed unusual characteristics. The barometric readings didn't match the forecast models, and satellite imagery revealed cloud formations that made her stomach tighten with concern. Sarah pulled up additional data streams, cross-referencing wind speeds with temperature gradients. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she accessed National Weather Service databases, NOAA satellite feeds, and local weather station reports. What she discovered made her blood run cold. All the indicators pointed to a massive weather event forming much faster than anyone had predicted. The computer models showed a severe storm system, but Sarah's analysis revealed something far more dangerous. The atmospheric conditions were aligning for a potential tornado outbreak, possibly including an F4 or F5 twister, directly threatening the Denver metropolitan area. She immediately called the National Weather Service office in Boulder. The duty meteorologist, Jim Reeves, had been tracking weather patterns for 20 years. "Jim, this is Sarah Martinez from Regional Emergency. I'm seeing some concerning data about today's system. Have you noticed the pressure differentials in Sector 7? There was a pause. "Sarah, we're monitoring the situation. Current forecast shows possible severe thunderstorms, maybe some hail. Nothing beyond our normal spring weather pattern. But if you look at the mesocyclone development and the wind shear values, I appreciate your concern, but we have experienced meteorologists handling this. Focus on your coordination duties." Sarah hung up, frustrated but not deterred. She had learned not to take dismissive attitudes personally. Instead, she continued her analysis, pulling data from sources others might overlook. University research stations, private weather monitoring companies, even amateur radio operators who tracked atmospheric conditions as a hobby. By 10:30, her worst fears were confirmed. The storm system was intensifying at an unprecedented rate. Wind shear measurements had tripled in 2 hours. The supercell structure was becoming clearly defined on Doppler radar, rotating with increasing violence as it moved toward populated areas. She tried calling Director Harrison, but his assistant said he was in meetings all morning with regional administrators. Sarah left urgent messages with 3 different supervisors, each time explaining the developing situation and requesting permission to activate emergency protocols. The responses were uniformly dismissive. "Martinez, the Weather Service hasn't issued any watches or warnings."
We can't justify emergency activation based on speculation. Let the professionals handle weather forecasting.
By noon, Sarah was certain that a major tornado outbreak would begin within hours, possibly affecting areas where over 200,000 people lived and worked.
Schools were in session. Hospitals operated at full capacity. Construction crews worked on high-rise buildings with no protection from severe weather.
She made one final attempt to reach Director Harrison directly. When she finally got through, his voice was sharp with irritation.
Martinez, I've gotten 3 calls about you pushing some tornado theory. The Weather Service hasn't issued anything beyond a thunderstorm watch. You're creating unnecessary panic. Sir, if you look at the data I've compiled, I don't have time for amateur meteorology. Do your job and let others do theirs. The line went dead. Sarah stared at her computer screen, watching the storm system continue to strengthen. Real-time satellite imagery showed the classic hook echo forming, the telltale signature of a violent tornado. She had perhaps 90 minutes before the first twisters would touch down.
That's when she made the decision that would define her career. She quietly gathered her emergency response materials, grabbed her radio equipment, and walked toward the elevator. If the system wouldn't authorize her to act officially, she would find another way to protect people. The Federal Emergency Management Center occupied the building's basement level, a hardened command center designed to coordinate disaster response across the entire region. Advanced communication systems connected to every emergency service, weather monitoring station, and government office within 3 states. From that room, warnings could be issued, resources deployed, and lives saved. Sarah had trained in the center dozens of times during drills and exercises. She knew every system, every protocol, every backup procedure. But she had never been granted independent access. Protocol required senior authorization for any real activation. As she approached the security checkpoint, her badge ready, Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. The guard, Marcus Thompson, had worked building security for 8 years. He knew her by sight, had seen her coming and going during training sessions.
Afternoon, Ms. Martinez. Little early for your usual drill time, isn't it? Emergency activation, Marcus.
Severe weather situation developing. She swiped her badge, hoping against hope that someone had updated her clearance level.
The scanner beeped, and the screen flashed red. Access denied. Emergency Operations Center.
Marcus frowned at his monitor. Moon system shows you need Director Harrison's authorization code for center access.
Want me to call upstairs? He's in meetings, Sarah said quickly. Maybe try calling the duty officer?
Marcus picked up his phone, but, after a few minutes of hold time, he shook his head.
Nobody answering. Budget meetings, you know how it is.
They'll be tied up for hours. Sarah thanked him and walked away, her mind racing. Through the building's windows, she could see the sky beginning to darken in the west.
Weather conditions were deteriorating right on schedule.
She took the elevator to the 4th floor, where the administrative offices had windows facing the mountains. The view confirmed her worst fears. Towering cumulonimbus clouds stretched from the horizon to the stratosphere, their anvil tops spreading like dark umbrellas across the sky. Lightning flickered constantly within the massive formations. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her college roommate, now living in suburbs west of Denver.
Sarah, the sky looks really weird here.
Almost green color.
Should I be worried?
Green sky was a classic indicator of severe hail and possible tornado activity.
Sarah's hand shook as she typed back. Get to your basement now. Stay away from windows. This is serious.
She tried calling the weather service again, hoping someone would listen to her updated analysis. This time she reached a different meteorologist, Dr. Patricia Wong, who had collaborated with Sarah on a research project 2 years earlier.
Pat, it's Sarah Martinez.
I know this is irregular, but I'm tracking a situation that's about to turn catastrophic.
Can you access your mobile Doppler data from the western stations?
Dr. Wong was quiet for a moment.
Sarah, I remember your work. You have good instincts. Let me check. Oh my god. How did we miss this?
The velocity couplet is off the charts.
This thing is showing EF4 characteristics and it's still strengthening. How long until official warnings go out?
I'm issuing a tornado warning right now, but the system takes time to propagate through all channels. Emergency managers might not see it for another 20 minutes.
20 minutes was too long.
The storm would reach populated areas before most people received any warning. Sarah made her decision. She returned to the basement level, but instead of approaching the main entrance to the Emergency Operations Center, she went to the service corridor that maintenance staff used for equipment access. During her training sessions, she had noticed that this route connected to the center through a secondary door used for bringing in radio equipment and computers. The service corridor was dimly lit and smelled of electrical equipment and cleaning supplies.
Sarah found the maintenance entrance she remembered, a reinforced door marked Authorized Personnel Only.
She tried her badge on the scanner, knowing it probably wouldn't work.
Red light. Access denied.
She stood there for a moment, considering her options. Through the door, she could hear the low hum of computers and communication equipment.
Everything needed to save lives was just a few feet away, blocked by an electronic lock and bureaucratic procedures.
That's when she remembered something from her technical training.
During a system update 6 months earlier, a technician had mentioned that maintenance doors had manual override procedures for fire emergencies. A mechanical key lock, hidden behind a small panel, could open the door if electronic systems failed.
Sarah found the panel, painted the same gray as the surrounding wall.
Inside was a standard lock that could be opened with basic tools.
She looked around the corridor and spotted a maintenance cart left by cleaning staff.
Among the supplies was a multi-tool with various implements.
Her hands steady now, focused on the task ahead, Sarah worked on the lock.
It took several minutes, and she constantly listened for approaching footsteps.
Finally, she heard the mechanism click open.
The door swung inward, revealing the Emergency Operations Center in all its technological complexity.
Rows of workstations faced massive display screens showing weather radar, communication networks, and resource deployment maps. The room was empty except for automated systems running their constant monitoring cycles. Sarah stepped inside and immediately went to the primary coordinator workstation. She logged in using her standard credentials, which worked fine for the operational systems even though they hadn't granted her physical access to the room. The main display screens came alive with her commands.
Weather radar showed the tornado outbreak beginning exactly as she had predicted.
3 distinct supercells had developed hook echoes, and the first tornado had already touched down 15 miles west of downtown Denver.
Sarah's training took over as adrenaline focused her thoughts.
She activated the emergency alert system, sending tornado warnings directly to every radio and television station in the region. She contacted the National Weather Service to coordinate warning distribution. She called emergency services in affected areas, providing specific target information for the approaching storms. Most importantly, she activated the outdoor warning sirens in 13 communities directly in the tornado's path. The next hour passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Sarah tracked multiple tornadoes as they carved destructive paths across the landscape, constantly updating warnings and coordinating emergency response. She directed search and rescue teams to areas where mobile homes had been destroyed, coordinated medical helicopter deployments to overwhelmed hospitals, and managed evacuation routes as roads became blocked by debris. Her Spanish language skills proved crucial as she personally handled communications with emergency workers in predominantly Hispanic neighborhoods, ensuring that warnings reached everyone regardless of language barriers. At one point, Director Harrison's voice crackled over the radio.
"Emergency Operations, this is Director Harrison. Who authorized center activation?"
Sarah keyed her microphone calmly. "This is Coordinator Martinez. I have 14 active tornadoes in the region and approximately 50 casualties requiring immediate medical evacuation.
Do you want to discuss authorization procedures right now, or would you prefer that I continue saving lives?"
There was a long pause.
"Continue your operations, Martinez.
We'll discuss protocols later." By 6 that evening, the tornado outbreak had passed, leaving behind a trail of destruction but far fewer casualties than would have occurred without early warning. Sarah's decisive action had given people crucial extra minutes to seek shelter. Schools had time to move children to safe areas. Hospitals activated emergency protocols. Construction workers evacuated high-rise job sites. The final count showed 37 people injured, mostly with minor cuts from flying debris, but no fatalities. Weather Service analysis later confirmed that the tornado outbreak included 2 EF4 tornadoes and 1 EF5, among the most violent storms in Colorado history. Sarah remained at her post until the last emergency vehicle had cleared the last debris-blocked road, until every injured person had reached medical care, until every family separated by the disaster had been reunited. As she finally prepared to leave the Emergency Operations Center, she found Director Harrison waiting by the door. His expression was unreadable, somewhere between anger and amazement.
"Martinez," he said slowly, "we need to talk." Sarah nodded, exhausted but certain she had made the right choice.
"Yes, sir.
We do."
She gathered her materials and followed him toward what she knew would be either the end of her career or its true beginning. Either way, she had proven that sometimes the most important authorization comes not from a badge or a bureaucrat, but from the courage to act when lives depend on it. The red light above the scanner still blinked as she passed, but Sarah no longer cared about its judgment. She had found her own way in. #You're not authorized to enter. Moments before she took control, Director Harrison's office felt smaller than usual as Sarah sat across from his massive oak desk the following morning. The walls were covered with commendations, photographs of Harrison with state officials, and emergency response charts that suddenly seemed less important than they had 24 hours ago. The morning sun streaming through the windows illuminated dust motes floating in the air like tiny pieces of debris from yesterday's storms.
"Do you understand what you did yesterday?"
Harrison's voice was carefully controlled, but Sarah could see the tension in his jaw. "I responded to an emergency situation using my training and expertise," she replied evenly.
"I followed established protocols for life-threatening weather events."
"You broke into a restricted facility."
"You activated emergency systems without authorization."
"You initiated a region-wide alert based on your personal interpretation of weather data." Harrison leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly on the desk surface.
"Do you have any idea what kind of investigation this is going to trigger?" Sarah had spent most of the night thinking about exactly that question.
She understood that her actions had violated numerous regulations, crossed multiple chains of command, and could be construed as insubordination or worse. She also knew that 37 families had gone home to their loved ones because of what she had done. "Sir, with respect, I used the same weather analysis techniques that are taught in every emergency management program in the country."
The data clearly indicated an unprecedented tornado outbreak. Every minute of delay would have cost lives. Harrison pulled out a thick folder from his desk drawer. "I've been getting calls since 5 this morning. The regional administrator wants a full report. The state emergency management director is asking questions about our security protocols. The Federal Emergency Management Agency is sending investigators."
He opened the folder and began reading from official-looking documents.
"Unauthorized access to restricted facilities. Activation of emergency systems without proper authority. Potential violation of federal emergency management regulations." He looked up at Sarah. "This could end your career."
"Hell, it could end both our careers." Sarah felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach, the same feeling she'd experienced countless times when her expertise was questioned or dismissed.
But this time, something was different.
This time, she had absolute certainty that her actions had been correct.
"Director, have you reviewed the damage assessment reports from yesterday?" Harrison's expression flickered with something that might have been confusion.
"What does that have to do with the tornado that hit the Riverside Elementary School area?" Sarah continued. "The one that was rated EF4 with winds of 170 miles per hour. That tornado passed directly through the school playground at 2:47 p.m.
"Do you know why there weren't any children on that playground?"
Harrison was quiet, but Sarah could see recognition beginning to dawn in his eyes.
Because my warning gave them 8 extra minutes. 8 minutes to get 340 children into the basement shelter. The official Weather Service warning didn't reach the school until 2:52 p.m., 5 minutes after the tornado passed. Sarah pulled out her own folder, filled with reports she had compiled through the night. The Meadowbrook Mobile Home Park. 97 residents, many of them elderly. My Spanish language warnings reached their emergency coordinator at 2:15 p.m. The tornado destroyed 60% of the park, but everyone was in the community storm shelter. 0 casualties. She turned to another page. The construction crew working on the Morrison office building. 14 workers on the 20th floor when the EF5 tornado passed within half a mile. They had evacuated to ground level because of warnings I issued directly to their supervisor. The storm destroyed 3 construction cranes and shattered every window on the top 10 floors. Harrison's face had grown pale as Sarah continued her recitation. St. Mary's Hospital was able to move 37 critical care patients to protected areas because of advance warning. The medical helicopter that was landing when the first tornado touched down was diverted to a safe location, preventing the loss of $1 million aircraft and a 3-person flight crew. Sarah closed her folder and looked directly at her supervisor. "Sir, I understand that I violated protocols. I understand that there will be consequences. But I also understand that my actions yesterday saved lives. I won't apologize for that." The office fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning system. Harrison stared out the window for a long moment, his fingers drumming silently on the desk surface. "The preliminary damage assessment came in an hour ago," he said finally. "Property damage is estimated at $47 million. But you're right about the casualty count. In a tornado outbreak of this magnitude, we should have been looking at dozens of fatalities, hundreds of serious injuries." He turned back to face Sarah. "Instead, we have 37 people treated for minor injuries and released." The state emergency management director called it a miracle. "It wasn't a miracle," Sarah said quietly. "It was preparation, training, and early warning. The same things we're supposed to provide every time." Harrison opened another file on his desk. "I've been reviewing your personnel records. Your academic credentials, your certification scores, your performance evaluations." He paused. "Your weather analysis yesterday was correct in every detail. The meteorologists at the Weather Service are calling it the most accurate tornado outbreak prediction they've ever seen from an emergency management coordinator." Sarah felt a flicker of surprise. She hadn't expected vindication to come from the very agencies that had initially dismissed her warnings. Dr. Patricia Wong at the National Weather Service sent a formal commendation. She says your analysis techniques identified storm characteristics that their standard models missed. She wants to know if you'd be interested in consulting on severe weather prediction protocols. The knot in Sarah's stomach began to loosen slightly. "What does that mean for my situation here?" Harrison leaned back in his chair, suddenly, looking older than his 53 years. "It means I have a problem, Martinez. I have an employee who violated half a dozen regulations and potentially saved hundreds of lives in the process. I have investigators asking questions about security breaches and supervisors asking questions about emergency response effectiveness." He stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at the clear sky that revealed no hint of yesterday's violence. "It also means I have to ask myself some uncomfortable questions about how this department operates." Sarah waited, unsure whether she should speak or remain silent. "When I started in emergency management 22 years ago," Harrison continued, "the biggest challenge was lack of information. We didn't have real-time satellite data, sophisticated computer modeling, instant communication with field personnel. We made decisions based on limited information and hoped for the best." He turned back to face her. "Now we have more information than we've ever had, but we've created so many layers of authorization and approval that we can't act on it quickly enough. Yesterday, you had the information needed to save lives, but the system prevented you from using it." Sarah felt a cautious sense of relief beginning to build. "What happens next?" "Next, you're going to write a detailed report of your actions yesterday. Every decision, every communication, every protocol you followed or bypassed. You're going to document your analysis methods and explain your reasoning for each warning you issued. Harrison returned to his desk and picked up another document. You're also going to participate in a review process with state and federal emergency management officials. They want to understand how one coordinator was able to provide more accurate warnings than the combined resources of multiple agencies. And then, we're going to figure out how to prevent this from happening again. Harrison's expression was serious. Not prevent you from taking action, but prevent the circumstances that made unauthorized action necessary. Sarah felt her eyebrows raise in surprise. You're not suspending me?
Martinez, in the last 18 hours, I've gotten calls from the governor's office, 3 different federal agencies, 2 universities, and 4 news organizations.
They all want to know the same thing. How did a 28-year-old emergency coordinator provide better storm warnings than the National Weather Service?
He handed her a letter from his desk.
This is from the Regional Emergency Management Director. She wants to recommend you for the Excellence in Emergency Response Award. It's the highest honor given to emergency management professionals.
Sarah stared at the letter, hardly believing what she was reading.
I don't understand. Yesterday you said I was creating unnecessary panic. Yesterday I was wrong. The admission seemed to cost Harrison considerable effort.
Yesterday I let bureaucratic procedures override common sense and professional judgment.
Yesterday I failed to listen to an expert because she didn't fit my expectations of what expertise looks like.
He sat down again and looked directly at Sarah.
That ends today.
Starting immediately, you're being promoted to Senior Emergency Response Coordinator. Your new responsibilities include developing rapid response protocols for severe weather events and training other coordinators in advanced analysis techniques.
Sarah felt overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of her circumstances.
Sir, I appreciate this, but I'm not sure I understand what changed.
What changed is that I spent last night reviewing footage from yesterday's tornado damage. I saw the elementary school that could have been full of children.
I saw the mobile home park that could have been a mass casualty event. I saw the hospital where dozens of patients could have been killed if they hadn't been moved to safety. Harrison's voice grew quiet.
I also saw something else.
I saw what happens when we prioritize procedures over people, when we value authority over expertise, when we choose bureaucracy over bravery. He stood up again and extended his hand to Sarah.
Martinez, I owe you an apology. You did your job yesterday better than anyone else in this building, including me.
You saw a threat, you assessed it correctly, and you took action to protect people.
That's exactly what we're supposed to do. Sarah shook his hand, still processing the dramatic change in her situation. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. You already haven't let me down.
What you did yesterday reminded me why I got into this business in the first place. Harrison smiled for the first time since she'd entered his office. Now, let's talk about how we're going to make sure you have the authority to do your job properly next time. Over the next hour, they discussed changes to emergency response protocols, improvements to communication systems, and new training programs for weather analysis. Sarah found herself energized by the conversation, excited about the possibility of building better systems that could respond more quickly to future emergencies. As their meeting concluded, Harrison handed her one final document.
Your new access credentials. Full authorization for the Emergency Operations Center, anytime, under your own authority. No approval required.
Sarah looked at the identification badge, seeing her own photograph next to clearance levels she had only dreamed of achieving.
Thank you, sir. This means everything to me. It should mean everything to the people we serve. They deserve coordinators who can act quickly when their lives are at risk. Harrison walked her to the door. Martinez, there's one more thing. The investigation I mentioned? It's still happening.
There will be questions about security protocols, about authorization procedures, about how emergency response systems can be improved. Sarah felt a flutter of concern.
What kind of questions? The kind that lead to positive changes. The investigators aren't looking to assign blame, they're looking to understand how emergency management can be more effective. Your actions yesterday highlighted problems that need to be fixed, and fixing them will save more lives in the future. As Sarah left Harrison's office, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment mixed with responsibility. She had proven that expertise and courage could overcome institutional barriers, but, more importantly, she had helped create an opportunity to build better systems for the future. Walking through the hallways where she had faced dismissive attitudes and bureaucratic obstacles, Sarah now saw colleagues who nodded with respect, who asked questions about her weather analysis techniques, who treated her as the expert she had always been. The red light above the Emergency Operations Center scanner now flashed green when she approached, welcoming her into the room where she could do her most important work. But Sarah knew the real authorization had never come from a badge or a computer system. It had come from her willingness to act when action was required, regardless of the consequences. That afternoon, as she settled into her new office with its view of the mountains where yesterday's storms had formed, Sarah began work on new protocols that would ensure no coordinator would ever again face the choice between following procedures and saving lives. The next time someone walked up to those reinforced doors, they would be authorized not just by institutional permission, but by the confidence that comes from expertise, preparation, and the unwavering commitment to protect the people they serve. #You're not authorized to enter. Moments before she took control 6 months after the tornado outbreak that changed everything, Sarah Martinez stood in the same emergency operations center, but the room around her had been transformed. Additional workstations lined the walls, each equipped with advanced weather monitoring systems that she had helped design. Multiple large screens displayed real-time data from weather stations across 3 states, and the constant quiet chatter of radio communications filled the air with the sounds of a fully operational command center. Today was different from that desperate afternoon when she had broken into this room to save lives. Today, she was training the next generation of emergency coordinators, teaching them not just the technical skills they needed, but the confidence to trust their expertise when it mattered most. The key to severe weather analysis isn't just understanding the data, Sarah explained to the 8 coordinators seated around the main conference table. It's understanding how different atmospheric factors interact in ways that computer models sometimes miss. She gestured to the main display screen, which showed a complex weather pattern developing over eastern Colorado. Who can tell me what this pressure gradient indicates? Jennifer Walsh, a recent graduate from the University of Colorado's Emergency Management Program, raised her hand. The rapid pressure drop suggests strong wind development, possibly severe enough for thunderstorm activity. Good start, Sarah said. But look deeper. What do you see when you combine that pressure data with the wind shear measurements and the temperature differential? The coordinators studied their individual monitors, analyzing the same real-time weather data that Sarah had been tracking since early morning. This storm system wasn't threatening like the one 6 months ago, but it provided an excellent training opportunity for recognizing atmospheric patterns. Marcus Chen, a meteorology student completing his emergency management certification, spoke up. The wind shear is creating rotation in the cloud formations. If the system strengthens, we could see supercell development. Exactly right, Sarah nodded. And what would that mean for our response protocols? Pre-positioning emergency resources, answered Lisa Rodriguez, who had transferred from the California Emergency Management System. Alerting hospitals and schools in the potential impact area. Preparing public warning systems for rapid activation. Sarah smiled, remembering her own early training and how theoretical everything had seemed until she faced her first real emergency. These coordinators understand something that took me years to learn. Emergency management isn't about reacting to disasters after they happen. It's about recognizing threats early and taking action before anyone realizes how serious the situation has become. The training session was interrupted by Sarah's radio crackling to life. Senior Coordinator Martinez, this is Boulder County Emergency Services. We're getting reports of a missing hiker in the foothills. Weather conditions are deteriorating rapidly. Sarah keyed her microphone. Copy, Boulder County. What's the hiker's last known position? Mount Sanitas Trail, approximately 2 miles from the trailhead. 23-year-old male, experienced hiker, but he's not equipped for overnight exposure. Temperatures dropping fast with this weather system moving in. Sarah looked at her trainees, seeing an opportunity to demonstrate real-world emergency coordination. This is why we monitor weather patterns constantly, she explained. That storm system we've been tracking is bringing temperature drops of 30 degrees and possible snow above 7,000 feet elevation. Our missing hiker is at 8,000 feet. She turned to the radio. Boulder County, this is Martinez. I'm deploying search and rescue assets immediately. Based on current weather analysis, we have approximately 4 hours before conditions become life-threatening for an exposed individual. The next 2 hours showcased the transformation of emergency response capabilities that had occurred since Sarah's unauthorized actions the previous spring. She coordinated 3 search and rescue teams using GPS tracking and real-time weather updates, deployed medical helicopter support from 2 different hospitals, and maintained constant communication with the hiker's family and local law enforcement. Most importantly, she guided her trainees through each decision, explaining how weather analysis informed resource deployment, how communication protocols ensured efficient coordination, and how advanced preparation allowed rapid response when lives were at risk. Jennifer, I want you to monitor the temperature readings from the mountain weather stations, Sarah instructed. If we see temperatures dropping below 35 degrees, hypothermia becomes a significant risk factor. Marcus, you're tracking the helicopter weather minimums. Wind speeds above 25 knots or visibility below 3 miles means we lose air support. Lisa, maintain contact with the rescue teams. They need weather updates every 15 minutes so they can adjust their search patterns based on where the hiker would most likely seek shelter. At 4:30 p.m., the radio crackled with the news everyone was waiting for. Emergency operations, this is Rescue Team Alpha. We have located the missing subject. He's conscious and responsive, showing early signs of hypothermia but in stable condition. Requesting medical evacuation to Boulder Community Hospital. Sarah felt the familiar rush of relief that came with successful emergency operations. Copy, Rescue Team Alpha. Medical helicopter is en route to your position. ETA 8 minutes. She turned to her trainees, who were all grinning with the excitement of their first successful real-world rescue coordination. This is why we do this job. This is why all the training, all the preparation, all the analysis matters. Somewhere, a young man is going home to his family tonight because we were ready when they needed us. As the emergency wound down and the rescued hiker was transported safely to medical care, Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she had been expecting. Sarah, this is Dr. Patricia Wong at the National Weather Service. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Of course, Dr. Wong. What can I do for you? I'm calling about the severe weather prediction project we discussed. The preliminary results from your analysis techniques are remarkable. We've tested your methods against historical tornado outbreaks, and your approach consistently provides earlier warning than our standard models. Sarah felt a surge of pride, not just for personal recognition, but for the potential to improve emergency response on a much larger scale. I'm pleased to hear that the techniques are proving useful. More than useful. We want to incorporate your analysis methods into the National Weather Service operational procedures. We're also recommending you for the National Emergency Management Association's Innovation in Emergency Response Award. Sarah looked around the operations center, watching her trainees discuss the day's rescue operation and continue monitoring weather patterns for any new developments. 6 months ago, she had been locked out of this room, fighting for the authority to do her job. Now, her methods were being adopted nationally. Dr. Wong, I'm honored by the recognition, but the real success isn't individual awards. It's building systems that work when people's lives depend on them. Which is exactly why we want to work with you. Your emergency response philosophy seems to be that expertise should drive action, not bureaucratic approval processes. Sarah laughed softly. Something like that. I learned the hard way that the authority to save lives comes from knowledge, preparation, and the willingness to act when action is needed. After ending the call, Sarah walked to the windows overlooking the city she had helped protect during that violent spring afternoon.
Downtown Denver stretched below, bustling with people going about their daily lives, most of them unaware of the constant vigilance required to keep them safe from natural disasters. Director Harrison appeared beside her, carrying a thick folder of documents.
How did the training session go today?
Very well. These new coordinators understand something that I had to learn through experience. They trust their training, they're not afraid to make decisions, and they understand that emergency management is about preventing disasters, not just responding to them.
Harrison nodded approvingly.